So you might have heard about Netflix's snafu with trying to go live for their Love is Blind Season 4 finale. I was one of you. I was sitting there watching my computer, waiting for it to go live as the clock ticked 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, 30 minutes, an hour. Well, I'm going to break down some lessons that you can learn if you are an event producer, an event planner, an event host, so you can avoid making some of the mistakes that Netflix did. Before we jump into it, I'm Logan Clements, a freelance event producer based here in Seattle, Washington, but I do events all over the world. I do want to remind you to like, subscribe, turn on that little notification bell so you get notified every single Monday when I drop new videos. I also have more free content on the Better Events podcast, which I co-host with fellow event pro Mary Davidson. We drop episodes every single Wednesday. We just celebrated over 100 episodes of the podcast, so I promise there's so much free content there for you to digest if you're still trying to learn and grow and hone your skill in the event industry. Without further ado, let's get back into it. So let's just picture it. If you weren't someone who watched this, I can just paint the picture in your mind of what was happening. We were all across the country. People were tuning in to see this live finale on Netflix, which, mind you, Netflix is normally just an on-demand. They drop episodes, you binge watch them. That's their model. And they tried something new. They'd only done this once before where they went live, and it was quite successful for their stand-up comedy by Chris Rock that a lot of people tuned in to watch. So I could see why they wanted to do it again. But it didn't go off without a hitch. And I will call out a couple of the mistakes they made so you can avoid them. Number one is always have a backup plan. And I do lots of these videos, and I have often talked about how important it is to talk through the scenarios of what could go wrong with your event. And honestly, as an outsider, again, I have no affiliation to Netflix. I wasn't behind the scenes. I wish I was. It would have been really fun to see how they were handling the situation. But you need to talk through these backup plans of what happens every time I do a stream, whether you're a small nonprofit client and we're only doing it for about 50 people, or if we're doing it for 5,000, I'm going to do the same process where we talk through what could happen, what could go wrong, and what would we do. It's very often that you would have a backup stream. So if their internet went down, that they should have a redundancy, we call it, meaning a backup plan, a second connection that you could quickly flip over to. I would hope that they've done testing would be another one. That's part of my backup plans is you test your plan A, but you should also test your plan B, including even having slides that say, hey, we'll be right back, and whatever that plan is. So making sure you have a backup plan, because I will say as an outsider, for how long it took Netflix to get out communication and things like that, it didn't feel like they talked through what would happen if they couldn't go live at 8 p.m. Eastern. And that kind of dovetails into my second tip as an event planner is that communication is key. I feel like part of what has turned into this big to-do about, and the lovely memes, I will say the internet's a great place sometimes for just putting levity into moments, but lots of memes about it being late and what the reasons were, because Netflix, I don't feel like got in front of the narrative. So again, back to my backup plans tip is make sure you also know how are you going to get that information out. I have been a part of an event where something has crashed and not gone according to plan, and we weren't ready. And so we would have been like Netflix in the start of the pandemic, where it would have been like, oh no, what do we do? It's taking us a while to figure it out. But since then, I've always had, we have an email ready to go. We know the person who's going to be in charge of hitting send to say either we'll be right back and, stay looking at your inbox, or, here's the new link to join. I will often have a backup link created. Like if I'm doing an event in Zoom, I'll have a backup Zoom already created, ready to go in my spreadsheet. So all I have to do is copy and paste it and send it to people. And while Netflix doesn't have everybody's email address, I don't know, they could have done something with like push notifications, or like they should have thought through this plan and knowing what's capable with their platform to get that information out. Because I will say I'm not a Twitter user, but I turned to Twitter because I was confused if it was my internet, if it's everybody's internet. This is exactly how your attendees would be feeling, especially if you do a virtual event or have a hybrid component because you're not in person. I do listen to a couple of podcasts and I'll drop them in the show notes, but one was talking about being there physically in person too, and they were equally confused. So it doesn't feel like we were alone in the struggle virtually, because it seems like they didn't handle it in person either. But backup plans, making sure you have a communication plan. And my third one would be make sure you have the right people in the right roles. All I can do is assume that it took so long because certain decision makers were not present, or they hadn't thought through how they would get a hold of them. But it is not hard to put together like a slide that they throw up on the screen. Again, I like to have some of these pre-planned so we have them and all we have to literally do is put them on the stream versus having to create them. But you can create graphics in the moment to throw up there and put it on the screen and tell people, hey, and maybe it was they didn't know what to say. And that's fine too. Again, it's helpful to think through this ahead of time, what your messaging is going to be. But I think they started to take that humorous side on Twitter. They could have had some of that humor virtually as well. So make sure you have backup graphics. I call them the "we'll be right back" slide. You can have more than one of those. You could have several if you wanted. They had one up there that just said, "we'll be starting soon." And they had that up there for about 30 minutes past when it started. Maybe it was about 20, but this is, again, I talk about virtual. It feels like dog years. So even if it was only 20 minutes, it's going to feel like an hour to people virtually. Before they put up something saying, we're having issues with the stream. We'll be up as soon as we can. So I think there's just a way they could have handled that better. And then my last tip for you as an organizer is don't let this Netflix situation of them trying to go live and, kind of not hitting the mark deter you from trying something new. Because yes, Netflix normally drops videos that are essentially on demand and they tried to go live, didn't really go as smoothly as they wanted, but it did get everyone talking about the finale, maybe not for the right reasons, but it did get people talking about it. But I would encourage you, as long as you're following that backup plans, you're making sure you have a communication plan should anything go not according to plan, and you've got graphics and everything set up and the right people in the room to help make those decisions, you're going to set yourself up for success no matter what you try. And a lot of times I do encourage you as an organizer just to try something new and step out of your comfort zone, but just make sure that you've done your homework and you are prepared for what to do if things don't go according to plan, especially if you're trying a new format, a new system. A lot of my event clients will know I often will reassure them as we get close to the event coming around. I can't promise that the event's going to go perfect, that everything will go according to plan, but I always assure them that they have the right people in the right roles, and we have talked through so many different scenarios that we will be ready to handle whatever comes our way. And so just know that the right people in the right roles are going to be ready. And if you make sure that you have that on your event team, if you don't, please have those conversations. It is so important to be feeling confident that the people behind your event can handle whatever happens because it's the beauty of events. Lots of things go according to plan, but there are always things that don't go according to plan. And sometimes they're pretty basic and sometimes they're pretty out there. And you want to make sure you have the right people who are empowered and ready to handle those situations. That's all I have for you folks. I'm Logan Clements, freelance event producer. This has been another installment of my favorite tips and tricks when it comes to event planning and running your own business. And I'll see you next week. Bye.